what is the elephant in the room, but since I'd like to phrase it more so that AI what doesn't get us bogged down in elephants and zoos. Uh, there is a consistent fear amongst people with when it comes to anything related to crypto that this is under the table somehow and that it might not be legal. So what do we do about that perception, and how does the legality of a DAO work out in the real world?
So you were supposed to ask me the question, what is the elephant in the room of DAO? But oh well.
I cleared it up so that just in case AI doesn't start talking to us about like zoo animals or some stupid. So what is the elephant in the room?
So the elephant in the DAO room today is the question of how do DAOs connect with the quote unquote real world. I don't want to open up the question of what's real, but the world of property, of government, of legal contracts, of taxes, and all of that, right? And I call it the elephant in the room because it's actually the biggest thing which I think is preventing further and deeper adoption and creating the most uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
Yet at the same time, yes, there's of course people talking about it, but I don't think it has as central a role as it deserves. Because without this being solved, at least for some use cases, there's never going to be mass adoption.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Right. Now, the other question is, so we have an idea of what the problem is. Now comes to the real world implications. How do these DAOs connect to us in the real world as we know it today?
So right now, this has really only been solved for a few use cases, and I think still mainly for, well, I mean, for some financial use cases, but I don't think any of it has been really properly tested in court, and there is a lot of uncertainty. We have, for example, a friend that's developed a DAO that can own property. So it's the first in Europe, but it's a custom legal structure through a Swiss foundation. It's complicated and it's expensive. It's like $50,000 in a year or two of work. In the financial space, I'm less knowledgeable. There is a little bit of people working, but like good luck getting a bank account for your DAO. I don't think that problem is solved in an accessible enough way.
Right. So you mentioned that it's been addressed for certain use cases. Can you expand on that a little? I know that's not part of this question we've written here, but I'm just curious.
Yeah. So what the maybe it's worth mentioning why we care about this, right?
Yeah, sure.
But the fact of the matter is, when it comes to, okay, let's look about this specific case, for example, it's a co-living regenerative village-like project where you can buy a few weeks or a few months of perpetual right to stay at the place through a token. But of course, the property needs to be owned in the legal system by some entity which the government can understand, right? That can own property legally, that can be registered in the register in the government, which is what determines who owns what, right?
Yeah.
An entity that can have a bank account so it can buy toilet paper. And going forward, we can call this toilet paper problem. How does a DAO buy toilet papers? We can write a whole article about that, actually. So yeah, this is an example of an interface, right? Normally you just have a company is owned through shares by some people, and those people have some contractual rights partially controlled by the government, partially controlled by the incorporation statutes to control this entity. But then how do you replace those people with a DAO. So a DAO can own a company, which can then own a legal piece of real estate, can have a bank, pay taxes, etc.
Mm. Good. All right. So with that said, the question here is contracts which are meaningful because courts and nation states with police forces back them. So maybe we can go into a little um, one step back and walk us through why we as a society need a contract and a governing body involved in the first place.
So what is society and why do we need it, in other words, right?
Sure.
Uh, yeah, I mean, at a meta level, the way I see it is that in the interest of being able to collaborate in larger numbers, we have outsourced violence to certain specific groups, which we then have created some kind of agreements around. In return for having the right to have that violence, they perform according to certain requirements. By this, I mean the police and the military, right? If we didn't have agreements and a police and the military and jails and courts backing agreements, then we would have to invent it. Or if you and I had a disagreement, my only recourse would be to try and get a stick and go beat you over the head with it. Which is actually, you live close to the tribal territories.
That's what
There
I'm
are
thinking. That
still
sounds
parts
familiar.
of the world where that functions. And somebody in your family goes crazy and shoots somebody in my family, my only recourse is to go and shoot two people in your family. But in order to avoid that problem, we've created the government and everything else. And of course, this is the extreme end. But everything from the 1 kilogram of sugar you buy in the supermarket actually being 1 kilogram, right? And you not having to worry about it because you've outsourced the worry and control and supervision, all of that, to the government. And similarly with contracts, right? It gives us recourse and it gives us the ability to, I think I know what it is. It's trust, right? Because when I have the government backing up our contract, this means I don't need to trust you as much because I have a recourse.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So this enables a larger amount of business, which means collaboration in lower trust relationships. Right? It's like effectively, if you look at the I don't know why I'm going for such violent examples today, but like in the 90s, it was heavy gang warfare in Russia. So in order to protect their lives, what some gangsters would do, they would pay a hitman, a retainer, like an amount. If I get killed, this money is for you to go kill who killed me. But see, I don't need that because I have the government and I have a fair degree of trust that if something really bad happens to me, the government will come and chase you down.
Right.
Right?
So that comes to, sorry, was that the end of the analogy?
Yeah. I mean, those were kind of asides around contracts and governments and stuff. But yeah, it's about having an external recourse that
Mm-hmm.
we can both look towards, that if things go really bad, will support us.
Right. So, to be clear, such a system does not currently exist in DAOs, does it?
So DAOs exist in their own universe. It's,
Yeah.
if you think of it, DAOs are pen and paper.
Right.
Pen and paper, yes, you need a pen and paper to write a contract, but it's the government and the people and the parties that actually matter, right? So through a contract, you're right, this contract is under the laws of state such and such. If there is a dispute, we go to here and here, right? What is this here for DAOs? I think, and more importantly, rather than trying to reinvent countries, courts, lawyers, and all of this from scratch. Instead, for the heavy lifting and for things which are in the real world, like humans, human bodies, human earth and property, things like this. How do we enable DAOs to interface with this world? Did I answer your question or did I go off topic?
No, no, you answered the question. That makes sense. So basically, which brings us very well into this new one, the last point. So we need an interface between the blockchain and the crypto contracts. So while that's
No, between
such an
the blockchain crypto contracts and the real world contracts.
sorry, so we need an interface between crypto contracts and the real world.
Yes.
So that
Or in
said,
shorthand between blockchain and matrix.
okay, and do we have as thought leaders any idea what that interface does? What does it look like, or what does it how does it function? Or is that too big a question?
No. I mean, so at the practical level, it's going to be some way of writing a connection in the DAO agreements and a connection in the legal agreements that the two match. Like I say, it's already being done in boutique cases in certain jurisdictions. Wyoming has a DAO interface. So people, I think the concept, I haven't looked at the details of those. I just know they exist and it's possible. So, but they just need to be universally available.
Yeah, that makes sense. So now the question is, how far are we, or what's missing, and what do we need to pull this off?
Well, we need people to work on this and to figure this shit out. Somebody who likes this legal stuff.
So basically,
Somebody
lawyers
not me.
and bureaucrats, the kind of people who are trying to basically make obsolete.
People who can take a creative, innovative approach to this, and who are able to really see the meta and the systems level and to really think. I think there's a degree of thinking more in the spirit of what the law and the systems that were created, what were the realities they were responding to versus what are the realities today, and doing it in such a way that the two systems can continue to co-evolve, right? I mean, it's different tools, right? In effect, it's the same way we've had to do the first primitive version of that, right? We went from paper contracts to emails can be used in court, definitely digital contracts, DocuSign, all of that shit. But that's still, it's doing the same dance, just like with pixels. We've made it into this horrible piece of admin. So we took out the spirit and we left the hassle of signatures, right? So instead, how do we remove the hassle and include the spirit in digital form? And we need people who are able to think about this and to think open-mindedly and creatively. And eventually, what we're definitely going to need as a movement is lobbyists and the people that work to change laws. But that's like 3 steps away from where I personally want to be. So I'm shit about that.
Cool. So now, so that you've kind of answered the next question as well, the kind of people, kind of interfaces we need.
Well, actually, looking at this, our notes here, no, I don't think we have, because it's actually worth going through this. We haven't gone through on one, because I talked a lot about property law ownership.
Sure.
I talked about bank accounts, okay, payments, etc. Then there's employment law, like it or don't like it, but for various reasons, it's important. Then we have service contracts, fitness for purpose, etc., etc. This is important. And interestingly enough, whilst at an individual basis, these haven't really shown to be like, you're not going to go sue Google unless you're a crazy person. But at a collective level, it has enabled in certain cases collective action. against when, like, they really fuck shit up. So service contracts are important, as are warranties, of course, right? So all of these things which right now rely on the stick of police and courts for enforcement, these are the things. And yeah, these are the things which we'll for sure need. And then as things develop and as DAOs enable more creative forms of collaboration which still touch the existing world. Another one, intellectual property.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. So yeah, everything that the regular legal system does for companies and individuals, we need to be accessible to DAOs.
Understood.
So let me ask you a question now. So it's not like what is in this area, what is most confusing for you or unclear?
So, being that, as you mentioned, that you're far away from legalities and all of that, I'm maybe even two steps further away. So, what I'm thinking of is how I'm not able to envision what shape or form this kind of agreement will take, and if it will eventually come down to a gentleman's agreement, right? If
No, I mean,
that's what I'm thinking.
this is think of it this way, right? We had an evolution in the legal system
Hmm.
which gave companies, which are legal fictions, many, if not most, of the rights of physical persons. Companies can own property, companies can sign contracts, companies can do lots of things, right? And this only happened over the last 200-300 years. It's a very novel institution. So now, the same way a company can own land, a DAO wants to be able to own a land.
Got it. And then it brings me to one more question. Um, with all forms of contracts, we have consequences. What do the consequences here look like? Ejection from a DAO? I mean, in this point, there is no legal entity
So this
involved.
is the
So,
whole point. We're talking about the elephant, which is the interface,
yeah.
right? So if there is certain contracts which are, or the contracts between you and a DAO, which also have a legal component, then you can take that legal component and take it to the court system. If you got some service from a DAO and they gave you a legal system backed warranty, and their service was not fit according to warranty, you can take this warranty to the court, to your lawyer, the same way you would normally, and litigate, because the contract exists, so the DAO has a representation in your world. The same way you can go and sue a company now.
Right. Okay.
What?
That makes sense. Now I'm just thinking of what else about this confuses slash is missing in my opinion. And I don't foresee. Okay, hold on. Just give me a second of this.
I can try another question if you like.
Okay. Uh, please
Yes?
go. Please go. No, I was just thinking
Which,
like
which of these use cases do you think is most urgent for DAOs?
great question. I think service contracts, because I foresee those being the very first use cases and the very first popular use cases for DAOs, and I feel like
Well,
that's where people.
can you describe an example of how you'd envision it?
Sure. So, for example, if somebody wants a Web3 product built, right? Where I know in this future, where the future we are envisioning, it's much broader. But I'm just thinking of how we get from here to there. So along the way, in the middle, we'll need to do something along the lines of, if somebody says, I want to build a DAO, right? So somebody else says, I'll build that for you for these conditions. That's where a service contract is going to be needed, right? That's where the first stages of for a contract I foresee being necessary. Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Yeah. I think and this one actually might be solved sooner. It's the toilet paper problem. How does a DAO wipe its ass? I.e., how do you get a bank account so you can have normal money? That one I think is almost solved. Because there is still so many, things that you need to pay, even online services, cloud services, that you need to pay through fiat. Cool.
Okay. And one last question. We were talking about, I was talking about consequences, but then what happens when a DAO is closed? Then is it archived in our vision? Is it archived somewhere for future reference, or is it just ancient history? It came and went.
So when a DAO ceases to exist, very good question. Uh, right now it's, I think it's at the level of yeah, this is the question, because the idea was autonomous, is that there is something that can continue running without people. Yeah,
Hmm.
it's a good question. Uh, I'm still very much thinking about birth and life and inception. I haven't
Right.
talked enough about death, but
Right.
it's an interesting and important question, especially like where you bring it up in the context of the elephant, right? If
Hmm.
the DAO has made some agreements, this is similarly, I think there you can look at a lot of the parallels of how it's dealt with companies. Though in the case of companies, the creation and destruction of companies is very much controlled by the government. And we don't want strict creation control over DAO by the government of DAOs, in which case, yeah, what about? I think probably they'll end up being lighter and heavier DAOs, right? Like the one that you use to plan your daughter's and her best friend's joint birthday party is one thing. The one you and I use to pool all of our savings for investment is another thing. Or the one that we use to start some side hustle selling Audax t-shirts is something else. Or the one that we still use to start what we hope will become a real serious business. Also, I think what will happen is as the DAO and the collaboration grows, the DAO will evolve. You'll start with the really lightweight one that can't have a bank account, has no recourse in the legal system. And then as you mature, at a certain point, you'll decide to invest the extra effort to go through all of the extra work so that there is connection to the matrix. But you'll only do that at a certain level of maturity and when you need it. Most things won't.
Got it. Well, although I personally think it might be beneficial to keep some form of an archive of the DAO at some point, although it does have
So all of
private.
the history, it's on the blockchain, right? So the actual activity of what happened is on the blockchain. It lives on forever, right? That's the thing with blockchain.
Okay, so yeah, then that makes sense, because then, from coming back to the point of AI, this it helps if one learns from the past, and if that helps us build better systems moving forward, then some form of the archive. When then the archive takes us to another question that circles back to intellectual property. Then will the archive be able to show personal information, and how do we decipher
So
agreement from personal information
this
and that?
is the, yeah, I mean, it's whole thing around tokens and token ownership, and it might well be that at the point that you want your DAO to have exist in the matrix and have matrix rights, at that point you have to declare who each address, that owns tokens is. It's possible, I don't know.
Okay.
But yeah, for those people that are reading, listening this, who want to work on this problem, it'd be nice if we had multiple paths, both really, really lightweight, one click, anonymous, as well as this is a company that, has a bank account with hundreds of millions or billions of fiat in it.
Got it. All right. So I think that's 30 minutes of conversation that we've given AI. I think the first 5, 6 minutes were just silence, but I think that gives us a good chunk of material to go with.
Cool.